if we can now have our next panel, including candidates from the State Senate District 9 and House Districts 21 and 22. All candidates will be asked 5 questions and will have 2 minutes to answer each question. Please take 20 seconds to introduce yourself, and then we will begin the question and answer session. So if we can have all of our candidates from State Senate District 9 and House Districts 21 and 22, and we can begin with the introductions.
We will begin with Rodney Long, and then Keith Perry, and then Alicia Magruder, and then Yvonne Hayes-Hinson and Hollye Merton next. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you very kindly for allowing me to participate. I think that's about 20 seconds right there. Am I correct? But I'm a lifelong resident of Gainesville, Alachua County. I've had the pleasure of serving in this county and in this city in 2 elected public offices. I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you very kindly and allowing me to speak.
Is it me next?
It is you, Keith.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I was late getting here. Thank you for that. What did you say? We have 20-second introduction. Is that it? Okay, well, that'd be easy. Good. My name is Keith Perry. Grew up here in Gainesville, Florida. Had only 2 jobs. I own a roofing business, Perry Roofing Company, and I've served in the legislature. I served 6 years in the Florida House, and I finished up my 6th year in the Florida Senate, and that's it.
All righty, if we can now have Alicia.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm Alicia Magruder. I'm a mom, a former public school teacher here in Alachua County at Archer Elementary and Howard Bishop Middle School. I'm a twice skater with a young son who goes to our public schools here in Alachua County. And I'm running for House District 22 against Chuck Clemens. I'm currently an educator at Johns Hopkins University, so I'm very passionate about education. And I've been working in activism and advocacy for many years. Thank you for having us tonight.
Thank you. If Ms. Hinson.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for hosting us. You already know that I'm a career educator. I have had a small business in education. I've been a city commissioner. As well, I've served on many boards, the Gainesville Housing Authority, the NAACP, ACLU, as well as the League of Women Voters. I've also been your state representative in District 20 for the past 2 years, soon to be 21. I have served you valiantly.
Thank you, Ms. Hinson. If we could please wrap up.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now if we can have Ms. Merton.
Thank you for having me this evening. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all. I'm a Florida grown girl. I was born in Fort Lauderdale. I moved up to Gainesville in 2004. I've been predominantly in the private sector doing management. I've actually worked for Alachua County and for the city. I currently work for the city, and I'm looking forward to, I'm running for State House District 21 against Yvonne Hinson. I believe that I can do considerably good work for the citizens of this area. Thank you. Oh, my website, www.hollyeforflorida.com.
All righty, thank you to all our candidates for those introductions. Now we will begin with the questioning and answering period. Please remember that you will have 2 minutes to answer each question and to be mindful of the chat for the timestamp so we're not going over time. The first question is from National Women's Liberation and Florida for All. During the last legislative session, the legislator passed a 15-week ban on the access to safe and legal abortions with no exceptions for rape, incest, and trafficking victims. This ban will dramatically impact access to health care for women and most negatively impact poor individuals and their families. Are you in favor of this ban? Do you support an individual's right to a safe and legal abortion? Why or why not? First, we're going to start off with Ms. Hinson.
Great. Well, as you know, I debated this bill on the floor till after midnight. I'm vehemently against this 15-week ban, and I've said so. I've said so in no uncertain terms. As well, I have called to action men. Men need to rise up and protect our women if they want, and it seems to be a lot of men want this 15-week ban, they should not get women pregnant. We do not get pregnant, but for a man. So I think we need to flip the script and start holding our men accountable as well as our women, and not put all the burden on the women. No, I don't support this 15-week ban, and I have fought it. I have been at a round table with the vice president to find some solutions to curing this from our women. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. If we can now have Ms. Merton.
Thank you. A 15-week ban on this. 15 weeks is, I believe, the time that the heart begins beating and fully developed. We're talking about a life here. Now, I agree with Ms. Hinson in the fact that, yes, we need to hold the men accountable, but not by killing the child. We need to hold the men accountable and have them back in their lives and make them help support the woman. Now, 15 weeks, as far as I know, if you had an abortion or you had if you were raped or there was a health issue or whatnot, that's some time to be able to decide, I believe. So I am in favor of the ban. However, I also believe that there are certain circumstances which must be considered using discretion. So on that point, I would have to disagree with Ms. Hinson on that. I believe that men should be held accountable, but the child should live. We're talking about infanticide if we don't. Thank you.
Thank you. If we can now have Ms. Magruder.
Sure thing. First and foremost, I believe that abortion is health care, and no one should be making any healthcare decisions for an individual. A woman's healthcare decision should be between her doctor, and whomever else she chooses to include in this decision, not the state. Therefore, I strongly reject the House Bill 5, which was the 15-week abortion ban. I think that that's just the beginning of more restrictions on our rights as women. When I am elected, I will propose legislation that provides abortion coverage under insurance and public funding. I will also push to codify abortion into state law in Florida. There is no shame in abortion. Again, it is healthcare, and it is a decision that should be between a woman, her doctor, and anyone else she chooses to include in that decision. And I am running for Florida House District 21, just so you know. I mean, sorry, Yvonne, 22. Apologies. I saw that look on your face. I had some historical brain.
My face gives a lot of messages.
You're like, no, you're not.
Thank you. If we can now have Mr. Perry.
Unmute this. There we go. Good. Yeah. So that bill, we debated it quite a bit. I supported that bill, and we'll continue to support bills like that. I guess the question, and it's not like we have a really big forum here. It'd be nice to do this thing more live and in person. But really, the question becomes, when does life begin? And I've failed to have any what I thought was real good debate and opining on that question. And so for me, life begins soon, early, and so the 15-week ban is something that I supported and would continue to support.
Thank you. If we can now have Mr. Long.
Thank you. Unlike my opponent, I oppose House Bill 5 because I think it's a woman's right and her family and her faith to determine when and where she wants to start a family. I don't think it's government's responsibility to do that. But I think what we need to understand here in the state of Florida is it's about to get worse than what it is now. I'm sure if not in a special session, in the next session, you're going to see language that's going to be actually tracking language, which was the cause of overturning Roe v. Wade in the state of Florida. And I think people need to understand elections have consequences. So I oppose House Bill 5, unlike my opponent. And I think that is totally a decision that's left up to a woman and her family and her God. Thank you.
Thank you to all our candidates. We will now be moving on to our next question. This question is from all candidate forum organizations. In response to recent mass shootings like Uvalde, Texas, and Buffalo, New York, and exponential increases in youth gun violence in Florida, there has been a major push for common sense gun safety measures. Do you believe that there should be gun safety reforms in Florida? What do you believe are common sense gun safety measures? We will first begin with Mr. Perry.
Sure. So certainly, if you remember after the Parkland shooting, we passed pretty comprehensive some gun reform bills that did a lot of things, from a lot of funding, mental health funding. Think about this. I'm 63 years old. I grew up where we used to have at Twilliger Elementary School, we would have turkey shoots at the spring fair in the playground at Twilliger Elementary School. It's hard to imagine that these days, but guns have been around for a long time. There's a reason that we have the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment has nothing to do with hunting. It has everything to do with protecting yourself. And it's clearly in the Constitution about why they have that from our founding fathers, why that is in there. I think probably the biggest issue that nobody seems to be addressing, or certainly head on, is the mental health issues. If you look at the kids that were involved in these shootings, if you look at the youth, the gun violence that happens on a regular basis, I think last year, someone told me there was over 120 gunshot reports in the city of Gainesville last year. So this is a crisis that we have, to have youth that are carrying guns and committing these crimes. And, and then I go into the prisons. I do a lot of work in the prisons. I've done that for 25 years. I'm just with a lady down at Lowell who was 18 years old with a group of other kids, went up into Georgia, robbed somebody, shot somebody, and then get a life sentence with no possibility of parole. So you're talking about lives that are ruined not only on the victim side, but you got the other side in the family of someone that does this. It's pretty devastating. So I think we need to look at that. I think also the bigger issue is the mental health issue, and why are our youth committing such heinous crimes. And that's what we got to get a hold of. And I think that we can talk about this on a broader sense. I've been fighting recreational use of marijuana. I've done lots of studies on this. I think that you're going to find that we're even going to have a bigger mental health problem. There's studies that go back to the early 1900s that show what can happen.
Mr. Perry, if you could please wrap up.
Yeah, so I think there's the bigger issue that we have is mental health issues, and why do we have all of this gun violence going on?
Thank you. If we can now have Mr. Long.
Thank you for the question. Currently, there are 120 firearms to every person in America. So if you look at it, there are more firearms in America than there are citizens, and that's because we do cherish the Second Amendment, which we all should. I'm a responsible gun owner, and I do believe in sensible gun safety measures. I do support the bipartisan legislation passed by Congress. I think it's a good first step. Mental health is a real challenge when it comes to part of the actual mass shootings that we're having. But I think we need to understand that a person should not be able to go into any store, buy a weapon that's designed for war, and go out and shoot people in synagogues and schools and things of that nature. So that is something that America's got to come to grips with. So what we do, we're going to have this conversation. Yes, we do have violence, not only when it comes to mass shooting, but we have violence right here in our own community. We got to understand that violence is something, gun violence is something we got to deal with. So we cannot be up in arms when we have excessive use of force by law enforcement officers against people of color, and not be just as not vocal when we're killing our own people. So gun violence is gun violence. So it's going to be a very interesting conversation in the next session regarding gun violence and how and what do we need to do when it comes to more gun safety measures. So I just tell the voters of this state, stay tuned. That is going to be a very, very debated issue in the next session.
Thank you, Mr. Long. If we can now have Ms. Magruder.
Absolutely. Again, I'm running for House District 22. I am a Moms Demand Action Gun Sense candidate, very proud to hold that badge of honor. And I believe that what's happening in our country is an epidemic. We have the #1 mass shootings in the world. And in Florida, we have more in the past 3 years. We've had 40 mass shootings with over 100 people injured or killed. And we can do some very sensible things, especially with legislation, to help prevent these things. The first thing would be waiting period. So currently we do have a waiting period of 3 days in Florida, but I think we should increase that to 7 to 10 days. And then the next thing I believe we should do is enact a universal background checks. Basically, we would eliminate the ability for a private dealer to transfer a gun to an unlicensed person. And actually, we're talking about decreasing crime, right? That actually can decrease homicide rates by 15%. And I also believe that we should ban assault weapons. I believe the National Rifle Association is kind of leading the way in terms of where our legislation has gone. It's paid for many of our elected officials to be in office. I think we should regulate these assault weapons, and we should make sure that nobody has weapons of war in their personal homes.
Thank you. If we can now have Ms. Merton.
Thank you, Ashley. I keep hearing from these candidates a lot of talking points and spewing, regurgitating things that they hear on the news. A lot of it fallacy. It's not real. We don't have a gun problem in America. We have a people problem. And the reality is, when it comes right down to it, one of the best pieces of law that you could affect is get rid of the gun-free zones, because these people know where the targets are. Let me tell you something. I've done a lot of training. I've done tactical training, and I can tell you a lot of things about what's going on. And I'll guarantee you, if you elect me, I will take action and it will drop. Guaranteed. Now, assault weapons, they're semi-automatic weapons. They're not any dangerous than a 22 rifle that most kids used to use all the time to plink. A lot of stuff's going around, and the reality is a lot of it's misinformation. I challenge all Democrats to go out, find a good instructor, take a CCW course and learn. It might give you insight into how this is happening. Thank you.
Thank you. If we can now pass it on to Ms. Hinson.
Thank you so much, Ashley. I am a CCW trained person. I don't carry a gun because I'm just afraid I might hurt somebody with it, but I do want to know how to shoot one, so I did get trained. Also, it's people who use guns. If a gun is just sitting on a shelf or stored, it can't shoot anybody. It will take a person to shoot that gun. I am also a Moms Demand Action Gun Sense candidate. I am as well a BON award winner. BON is an acronym for Ban Assault Weapons Now. We have no reason to have weapons of war on our streets. I don't understand how an 18-year-old can walk into a store, buy 2 assault rifles and over 300 rounds of ammunition at one time, and nobody thinks something's going on. We certainly need rules and regulations to guard against things like that. Gun violence continues to plague our state, and it's plaguing our children, it's plaguing our communities, and not just in Parkland and Pulse. It's plaguing East Gainesville. It's plaguing East Gainesville. Where are these young people getting all these guns? I know that Moms is wanting to do something serious about gun storage. It's not just gun storage. There are people giving guns to our children, and our children don't know what to do with guns. We certainly need to limit the age that people get guns. Well, I would like to ban assault rifles, the ones that shoot people 10 and 12 at one time. I will admit, I don't know what that's called, Ms. Merton, but whatever it's called, it should not be on the street. I would also like to mandate the background checks. I would like to regulate high capacity magazines. I would like to expand the red flag laws. And true enough, I want to
Thank you, Ms. Hinson. If you could please wrap up.
Final statement. I want to ban assault weapons, the ones that killed 10 and 12 people at one time. Thank you.
Thank you to all our candidates. We will now be moving on to our third question. This question is from the Florida Immigrant Coalition.
Can I for 1 second, or is this not a debate? Are we not opining? Are we going back and forth at all, or is it just?
No, in order to maintain time periods, we're just giving a 2-minute questioning period for each of our candidates. And then if there's time left, there's a public questioning period at the end. Thank you. So this question is from the Florida Immigrant Coalition. Recent legislation has placed our immigrant communities under intense scrutiny. Are you willing to do what it takes to stand up for immigrant communities, even with budget limitations from the state? We will first begin with Ms. Magruder.
Yes, I am. I believe that there's been an unwarranted attack on immigrants in our state. I believe that we should repeal the ban on sanctuary cities. That also goes back to honoring local rule, which I believe in strongly. I think we can support community ID programs, which we actually have here in Alachua County. And I also think that as a state, we can support DACA recipients as well. Again, I just think it's a shame that we aren't welcoming in our state, and that there are many things that we can do to be more supportive of these communities.
Thank you. If we can now have Ms. Hinson.
Thank you so much. So we did have, I don't know about the money because they were, the GOP led legislature did put some money into immigration restrictions. Not only do they want to ban sanctuary cities, they want our law enforcement, our local law enforcement, to work with ICE and force our local law enforcement to turn over immigrants to ICE. I don't think that's the responsibility of our local law enforcement. Local law enforcement should be taking care of the safety of us all, including the immigrants that live among us. There were other restrictions like transporting immigrants across state lines. This was a far-reaching restriction on immigration that we campaigned heavily against, but of course we are outnumbered 2-1. So unless we change the very nature of the legislature, these attacks will continue. But I do oppose such attacks.
Thank you. If we can now have Ms. Merton.
Thank you. We have some other issues, and we really can't legislate from emotion on these issues. We are a nation of laws. We're a state of laws. We have rules and regulations on how immigrants should come into our country. The idea of we're probably one of the most gracious countries as far as immigration, as far as bringing people in, but we want them to assimilate. We want them to learn the American ways. We want them to appreciate America. Right now, what we have is we have a boatload of criminals coming in, and it's just not fair to the taxpayers, nor is it safe. Ms. Simpson talked about safety. What about the safety of the citizens that have criminals coming in that are living near them? Now, should we use discretion? Yes. That's not to say we should have a Gestapo going around pulling these people out. We need to use discretion at all times. So if we have somebody that's just got caught up in something, we need to figure things out. But we cannot continue letting the influx come in, and it's taxing everything. We have laws, we need to use them. And as far as the problem goes, well, follow the law. Thank you.
Thank you. If we can now have Mr. Long.
Thank you very much. What we're seeing in the state of Florida is a continuation of cultural wars, which continues to divide our state. I think what we need to be doing is trying to unify our state. America is a country of immigrants. Whenever you have laws that ban government, cities from welcoming immigrants to it, that is assault on local home rule authority. local government should be able to welcome into their communities based upon their elected officials whom they choose. We should not be working to turn over people who come to our communities to ICE. We shouldn't be transporting our people to other states. We have a war with our governor against the federal government who wants to transport immigrants back over the Florida line. If that happened to all of us who are immigrants, our parents, we wouldn't be here. So what we need to understand is we need to try to make sure that we push the pause button and come up with meaningful legislation, not talking at each other, sit down talking with each other, because immigrants are always going to be coming to our country and coming to our state. But most importantly, the legislature, who does not want the federal government to dictate to them what to do, should not be dictating to our local government what they cannot do.
Thank you. If we can now have Mr. Perry.
Sure. And to start off with these words, these culture wars, attack on immigrants, I think are certainly unfounded and unproductive. If you have specific issues that you want to bring up, but just make these broad statements, I think they're unfounded and unfair. And the talk about home rule, you read the Constitution, we are a sovereign state and we live in a sovereign country. We do not live in sovereign cities and we do not live in sovereign counties. Counties and cities are created by the legislature. And so there is a hierarchy on how things work. And to think that, and another thing, to say that broad things on home rule is not a debate on a policy, it's just this broad statement that people make. If you think about sanctuary cities, and if you think about laws, we have immigrants that come over here all today that are wanting to come here. They're hardworking people. They want to do what's right. They're law abiding, but they're breaking the law if they come over here illegally. But we also have an element in there that are both breaking the law to get in here, and they are not here to do good in this country. We have criminals. We have MS-13 gangs. And I want to think about the statement that's been made about sanctuary cities and working with ICE. Can you imagine if anybody suggested that we had somebody who committed a crime, a murder, a carjacking, whatever, in Atlanta, we found them in Gainesville, we knew that they were suspected in committing these crimes, or maybe they've been convicted and they escaped. Can you imagine if we said, well, we're not going to have extradition laws, that we're not going to take criminals? Can you imagine the state? A sanctuary city is saying that. What you're saying is you can be a violent criminal in some other place. If you come to a sanctuary city, we stop you for a traffic thing. We find out that you're wanted for a murder in Georgia, but we're not going to contact a federal law enforcement agency and let them know that we have you in custody. We're going to let you go. I think that you talk about a culture war, you talk about issues, you talk about having where one law enforcement agency says, we are not going to communicate with
Thank you,
other
Mr. Perry, if you can please wrap up.
Well, that's the issue. Do you want to have rules and laws, and you want to have law enforcement hold information back from other things? I don't think so. Not in my opinion.
Thank you to all our candidates. This next question is from the Alachua County NAACP and Graduate Assistants United. Within the last 2 legislative sessions, there have been a number of bills passed that target individual and academic freedoms. As a home of a public land-grant research university, many of these bills will harm Alachua County directly, particularly HB 7, also known as the Stop Woke Act, and HB 1557, the Don't Say Gay law. How do you plan on protecting the rights of Alachua County citizens? We will first be beginning with Ms. Merton.
I'll be taking a swig. Get some water. Okay, so on one bill, I want to focus on the quote, "Don't say gay" bill. I can tell you this much, and I'm going to be very curt and be very honest and straightforward. There is absolutely, unequivocally, no reason that a child in 3rd grade or lower should have any inkling about maybe they don't match the gender they think they are, maybe, or even, I've heard rumors, I'm not sure, but evidently some teachers were talking about their sexuality. Absolutely not. 3rd grade and below, it's a reasonable bill, and parents have rights. And the parents of these children, I'm sure they're just they were flabbergasted when they found out about this. This probably went on before COVID, because guess what? Parents are busy. They're both of them working, whatnot, to try and make a living to raise their children. They don't particularly maybe have time to spend all the time at school and monitor. So, yeah, and that term, don't say gay, there was nothing in the bill that said anything about being gay. So it's a ludicrous concept, and I support the bill 100%. And we should not have our children learning these things, plain and simple. And anybody that suggests they should, well, I'm sorry. I definitely don't agree with you. I'll say that. Thank you.
Thank you. If we could now have Ms. Hinson.
Thank you so much. So first of all, I sponsored a repeal of the Academic Freedom Bill so that the University of Florida could maintain its current status, because not only is this academic freedom issue creating a situation with our accreditation, it's creating a situation with tenure for professors, as well as allowing our very intelligent and well-trained professors to testify in court with their expertise. It's doing some other things as well. I also want to talk about, and I'm not for any of this stuff, the CRT, critical race theory, which was never taught in public schools, never taught in K through 12 schools. It's clearly taught in law school, now becomes an issue for public schools, never ever been even taught in public schools. Now we have a problem with Black history in public schools, and talking about things in public school that make other children feel uncomfortable. I cannot believe we are actually arguing about telling the truth about people's history in school. There are some stop woke situations, and I think we need to stay woke. That's one of our problems. We need to wake up if we're not already woke. Yeah, I'm not for any of this, and I can't even comprehend why we are spending our time doing this when people need affordable housing, people need good health care. We have so many other issues that we should be talking about instead of creating this culture war.
Thank you. If we can now have Mr. Perry, or my apologies, Ms. Magruder.
Sorry, Keith, I'm sure you were excited to get on there. So first and foremost, I think that I agree with Ms. Hinson that this is a distraction. It's a culture war. And, you know, being an educator in higher education and also working in our public schools as a teacher, and having my son's public school teacher quit in the middle of the year, we have teachers leaving the field in droves. These gimmicks like the putting more pressure on teachers, preventing them from saying certain words or doing certain things when it's not even realistic. For example, sex ed is already prevented before third grade. So this idea that people are talking about something wrong is ridiculous. The reality is that there are many people who are gay, who are married, who are teachers, who are educators, and this is their truth. There are also students in our schools who consider themselves a part of this community. So this attack with the Don't Say Gay bill is absolutely ludicrous, and it's, again, just the beginning, in my opinion. In terms of academic freedom, being an educator and being someone who relies heavily on research and having the freedom to explore academia, I believe that this is really unproductive and limits the potential of our good people in higher education to do good work. And we don't need to be limiting potential. Now, like I said, I work in higher education. I work for an institution that is not based in Florida. This is being talked about across the country. And Florida's institutions are actually going to be in trouble if we keep attacking academic freedom at the state level in terms of accreditation and other, yes, ma'am, in terms of accreditation and other things. So I would work with Yvonne and others to prevent these things. Thanks.
All righty, thank you to all our candidates. This last question is from all the candidate forum organizations. Home rule by definition is the government of a colony, dependent country, or region by its own citizens. In the last legislative session, many bills were passed that targeted the ability for communities to address their specific needs, basically stripping power away from the people residing in those communities. What criteria do you use or would you use when determining if a locality should decide what is in their best interest, or when the centralized powers to determine what is in the locality's best interest? We will first begin with Ms. Merton.
Okay, as Senator Perry has mentioned, states are sovereign, cities are not. We do believe that communities should be able to govern themselves, but within reason. We do have a state constitution. If communities decide that they just want to ignore the Constitution, then that's a problem in my book. I believe I've mentioned before, we are a state of rules. We're a nation of rules and of laws. We need to obey them. And when it comes down to communities that want to do whatever they want at any time they want, then we need to take a look at it. And one of those particular ones, and it might not actually jibe with it completely, but we've had this community, as a matter of fact, try to enact their own gun control. That's absolutely wrong. So I support limiting their ability to do such things. Of course, again, I have to go back to the legislature using discretion in doing so. It can't go overboard. It should be along the lines of the state constitution, and that's it. So I'm sure when I'm elected, I'll learn a lot more about this, and I guarantee you I will work with both sides, and we'll come to an agreement. It's discretion, folks, discretion. Thank you.
Thank you. If we can now have Ms. Hinson.
Thank you so much. I actually kind of agree with Ms. Merton. It is discretion. There is a state constitution, but cities have ordinances. And those ordinances, frankly, once they're approved, we should let them govern their communities. All of our communities are different, and they need to be governed by the people who live within those communities, not from people all over the state. I have had situations where the state wanted to do something statewide where our community had already fixed the problem and had it fully under control to the people's satisfaction. Yet, if the state had enacted it, it would have affected our community. I had to bring that up so that they would know we need to be excluded from that. There are other situations. There's one situation where we were learning about one city was raising development taxes or taxes on something, and they were raising them over 30 and 40% at a time. Now that's unreasonable. And if you can show evidence that these particular communities are taxing their people unreasonably, then yes, the state needs to step in. But where communities are following their ordinances, their home rule ordinances, they are doing what they need to do to protect their communities, no, the state does not need to step in. They do not need to interfere with that, especially if it doesn't, as she said, violate the Constitution of the state. And that's my take on that. I believe in home rule. I've been a city commissioner, and I know that without home rule, we cannot keep our people safe. Thank you.
Thank you. If we could now have Ms. Magruder.
Sure thing. So I think that the state should set the floor, not the ceiling, for these kinds of things. And in terms of the question of constitutionality, if something is deemed unconstitutional, one could sue and the courts would overturn it. So, I would challenge that. But I think, preemption comes from because the state wants more control. It's not thinking about the actual people that are living in these communities, like Ms. Henson was saying. For example, we have House Bill 1493, which was put through by my opponent, Chuck Clemens, and that would basically make the county spend public funds on a referendum that was not requested by the folks in our community, but will be on the ballot because he pushed that through. And that will change the way we elect our county commissioners. Again, if the community wanted something like that on the ballot, the community could totally make that happen. We don't need a state legislator doing that for us. So I will oppose any attempt to violate the Alachua County Home Rule Charter. Also, there are other bills that have been enacted, like HB 19, which prohibits local decisions on energy sourcing, Senate Bill 620, which allows businesses to sue cities and counties if past local regulation results in 15% loss of profits. Basically, there are more, I'm sure, that we could, a long list of interference here. Again, I think that we need to really return to locally elected officials to make the decisions for our local communities. And I really just think it's hypocritical of those that are currently majority leading in our state legislature to suggest otherwise.
Thank you. If we can now have Mr. Perry.
Sure. So there's two criteria that you got to look at when you look at these bills. One is, so back in when Hurricane Andrew came through Florida, a lot of devastation in there, and the Florida legislature looked at making a unified building code that we're going to look at the state of Florida, and we have different wind codes and wind zones, but we made a unified building code. We didn't want every city to decide what was going to do. So there's times that it takes the state steps in and makes broad and gives power to Tallahassee. But I filed a lot of preemption bills. The first thing my opponents say, and you've heard it here tonight, is home rule. And they throw home rule out like that's a blanket thing. Saying that rule is not a debate on the policy of it. Every single bill that I focused on that have been preemption bills have not given power to Tallahassee. What they've done is they've taken it away from a city or a county, and they've given it to an individual or a business. Some of us on this panel are old enough to remember Gainesville in the state of Florida, that we used to drive through, and every single business, except for a couple, were owned by individuals, all of them. And now you see what you do is you see businesses that are owned by corporations, large corporations, or franchises. We have lost the ability for young people to start a business, which means we've lost all of this creativity that young people have, that they want to go change the world. They want to do something. And what they are regulated to do is work for some large corporation. And it's all worked up over years where all of the regulatory and legal environment that have prohibited so many people from going after their dreams. And so what we need to do is we need to look at cities and counties and say, you've overstepped that. What you're doing is you're inhibiting someone's freedom. Henson, you said that all communities are different. They are, but I can tell you one thing in common. All people are the same. People want opportunities to go out and change the world, use their skills and their talents to do that. The regulatory environment has diminished that on a huge scale. We have got to look at it, and we can't say, oh, home rule, we can't let home rule do that. No, we have to look at individuals and say, what are we doing for the individual? I'm going to continue to fight that. I don't get much Democrat support, unfortunately. I get some on a few of them, but I think it's time.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. If you can please wrap up.
Yeah, don't look at cities and counties. Look at the people, look at the individuals, and how we're going to give them an opportunity.
Thank you. And before we go on to our next panel, we do sincerely apologize. Oh, I am so sorry. Yeah. Mr. Long, if you could please go.
Well, I would not allow my opponent to get away or move on without me at least challenging the fact that, and I'm happy that he's admitted that he has filed more preemption bills on local government probably than any legislator in the legislature. The majority party in Tallahassee believes that one size fits all and is centralized in Tallahassee. I don't believe that. I believe that the government that's best for the people are the government that's closest to the people. Now, I find it interesting that the same majority who believe that they should regulate what happens in our local communities have failed to implement the will of the people regarding constitutional amendments, or they have drugged their feet and implemented it. Just to name a few. Minimum wage, Amendment 4, raiding of the Sadowski Trust Fund for affordable housing, Florida Forever funding. I can go on. But what we need to understand is government that's local is the best government for people. Now, what we need to understand is I get the fact that there are times when the state legislature should intervene and pass uniform laws when it comes to protecting the health and safety of our citizens, especially when we're talking about natural disasters. But when we're talking about everyday policies and ordinances that protect the health, welfare, and safety of local residents, the people locally have decided that by electing their local officials. So that's called local home rule authority. Now, if my opponent don't think that there is such a thing called local home rule authority, you need to understand that some counties have gone to the extent of becoming charter counties, to where they themselves have the authority under their charter to pass ordinance and things of that nature. So to me, I don't think it's a difference. I think it's just a difference of how we approach governance. And we should have shared governance.
Thank you, Mr. Long. You could please wrap up.
And not always appear to be in opposition to them.
All righty. Again, so our apologies, our sincerest apologies. We will be going back to the previous question before we move on to our next panel in order to give the State Senate District 9 candidates time to answer. I will be repeating the question for reference sake. This is question 4, provided from the Alachua County NAACP and Graduate Assistants United. Within the last 2 legislative sessions, there have been a number of bills passed that target individual and academic freedoms. As the home of a public land-grant research university, many of these bills will harm Alachua County directly, particularly HB 7, also known as the Stop Woke Act, and HB 1557, the Don't Say Gay law. How do you plan on protecting the rights of Alachua County citizens? If we could have Mr. Perry, please go. Mr. Perry, if you could please unmute.
He's left.
I think he left.
He's gone.
Are we repeating a question?
No, there just wasn't, the State Senate District 9 was passed over, so we are giving time now for them to answer this question.
So are we moving on to the next panel?
No, we will allow time for Mr. Long to answer.
Okay.
Thank you,
Mr. Long, whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much. First, starting with HB 7, the Stop Woke Act, which bans discussions based upon race in our schools and in our workplace.
Okay.
Here again, these types of bills does nothing to deal with everyday Floridians and the challenges that they face every single day. Housing affordability, Medicare, and those types of issues. The issue of banning books, for example, or having wars and fights with Disney, or telling school districts what they can and cannot teach local children should be left up to local people. They elect local school boards. As I said earlier, this is a part of the culture war that does not do anything to help everyday people. The Don't Say Gay bill, for example, to me, teaching education to our students about sex and those types of things, that's been going on for quite some time. And I'm not real sure that it's now all of a sudden a challenge until the governor and the majority party all of a sudden made it a part of the discussion. And the governor, if he has his way, we won't have local schools that have different autonomy. The final thing is academic freedom. The University of Florida has failed many people in this state when it comes to academic freedom.
Thank you. So if we could now, thank you to all our candidates for answering all these questions. We will be taking a brief 5-minute intermission.
No, we have an audience question.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So we have time for 2 audience questions. We have received one, the Q&A feature. So if you have a question that you would like the current candidates to answer, please type it in and we will ask that. So your first question comes from an audience member, and I'm going to mispronounce your name, so I really apologize. Stibalis Gomez. And they say, there have been some referring to immigrants as criminals, while also comparing to criminal actions such as murders. This isn't constructive nor true most of the time. Can there be a mention of actual immigration policy to deal with the issue of the 11 million immigrants currently in the US? Plans, what are your plans for a pathway to citizenship or any other ways?
Alrighty, if we could first begin with Ms. Hinson.
Thank you. I, of course, and when I ran for Congressional District 3, because this would be a federal issue, I believe we should help our immigrants that are here, especially our DACA students, find a clear pathway to citizenship. I don't think it should be burdensome. I don't think it should be expensive. And I don't think they should need a lawyer to do it. In fact, they come here seeking refuge, and they find themselves in a catchmire of being called illegal. Nobody's illegal. Nobody's illegal. They should be able to declare that they want to be considered for citizenship, and then follow a guided recipe that we don't seem to have in this country, but we keep welcoming immigrants without that. We need a clear guide path to citizenship for people who are seeking refuge in our country. Because like Rodney Long said, we are all immigrants. Some of us came here by force and some of us by choice, but nonetheless, we are all immigrants, and we found our way, and we need to be able to offer that to other immigrants. So illegal, the classification illegal will never have to be coined again. Thank you.
Thank you. If we can now have Ms. Magruder.
Sure thing. Like Ms. Hinson says, immigration policy is typically a federal issue, but I think there are some things that we can do in the state to support immigrants. I agree 100% that saying anyone is illegal is wrong, and it basically dehumanizes a large swath of our population. And I also agree that, many of us come from other countries, some people more recently than others, but it doesn't deny them the right to become an American as well. I think that we could potentially give benefits to immigrants that the state provides, perhaps in-state tuition to help people attend colleges and universities in our state. I think we can give support to local groups working on these issues. So fiscally, we can provide some funds, and also perhaps even think about programs where we can provide funds for lawyers or other legal fees to help people find their pathway to citizenship. I think this just goes back to what we value as Floridians and as Americans. And I personally value people. And I think people who are coming from other countries for whatever reason, they deserve a right to live a happy, healthy life as well. And I think that there are things that we can do to help them at the state level, instead of like Ms. Hinton was saying, putting restrictions and barriers for people.
Thank you. If we can now have Ms. Merton.
Yes, this will be the last question for me. I must go. Okay, so we're talking semantics when we're talking about calling them illegal. Let's get rid of that term completely. Okay, they're not illegal. They're not illegal people. but they did come here illegally, okay? And contrary to Ms. Henson, we do have a path to citizenship for immigrants. Initially, it was through Ellis Island, okay? Now we have it. We have border checkpoints that they can go through and request citizenship. Yes. Is it a process? Does it take a while? Yes. But there are countless thousands, maybe even millions, that have gone through that process and are flourishing, okay? They work hard, they've assimilated. Some of them maybe not as great as the others, but they've done it. Now, as far as the DACAs and the people that got caught up in there, again, I go back to that thing called discretion. Yes, we need to look at these cases on a single basis, a case-by-case basis, and maybe there is a way we can deal with those, okay? Not just wrap them up and take them, across the border. But there's a lot of them out there that truly don't fall in this particular realm. They are not very productive in our society, and as a matter of fact, like Senator Perry said, they do not have good intent for our society. So we have to use that discretion. We have to determine which ones are truly wanting to become an American, and then maybe find a path to them. But it's certainly not fair to the people that go through the process and earn their citizenship. It's not fair to them that they have to do it, but other people just walk across the border and they say, well, geez, I should be a citizen. I want to be a citizen. They need to go through the same process. It's very, very cumbersome on our system, but there are answers. We can come up with answers to deal with this. But as long as we keep our borders open and let the influx keep coming in, we're going to have more and more of a problem. So we need to deal with this, and we need to deal with this as a community on a whole, as together, not just at each other's throats about our separate beliefs. We both have different worldviews. Let's come together with those worldviews and figure out a solid solution for many of these problems. Thank you. And I thank you again for having me tonight.
Thank you. If you could please.
You all to do. Okay.
All righty. If we can now have Mr. Long.
Thank you very much for the question. There was a time when the word immigration was not meant to be divisive. Today in our society, and more specific in the last decade, we can't even seem to agree on policies that allow immigration to come to America. It appears as if we have two immigration policies in America, one for the Eastern Coast and one for the West Coast. And so the challenges that we have is how do we make sure that people who want to come to America, the land of opportunity, a land that many of us have come to, whether it was by choice or by force. And we found that America is the country of ideas that many of us aspire to. So what we need to do is, how do we work in the federal government to deal with the people who are already here, especially our DACA people? What is going to be the pathway for them to citizenship? We must find a pathway for our people when it comes to our DACA people. Also, immigration is an economic issue. There are people that are immigrating to our country that would be beneficial to us and our economy in terms of working in our agricultural type uses that many people in America just won't do. So we need to understand that we are a nation of immigrants, and we need to sit down like responsible adults and figure out a way of how we address immigration in this nation.
Thank you. Thank you to all our candidates for your responses.